All right, today we're going to go over the Zoom F8 audio recorder. In the bag, really simple setup. You have the actual recording device. It's got a power cord that connects to the power brick. Really simple, same setup as the Tascam. Then it comes with one cord that will both recharge the brick if that is ever needed, which it really shouldn't be needed, or you could plug the Zoom F8 right into the wall and power it. On the actual device, there are two SD ports. There are 8 XLR imports, hence the F8 system. On the back, there's a way to actually power this with AA batteries if that is ever required of you. You spin this till it opens and it'll pop open in the compartment that takes AA batteries. Here's the port to plug it in. Here's the headphone jack. Now it comes with an adapter for your normal headphone imports, but if that's ever missing, ask us for one in the equipment room and we have extras. Okay, let's take a look at this thing. To turn it on, you should turn the power bank on, and then the power button is in the bottom right hand corner. It's a press and hold situation and the system will power up. Now there's a lot to go over here, so I'm going to go over it as succinctly as possible, all high yield material that you need to know. So the first thing is that there is a SD card in here already, but we need to format it, right? So go to the menu, go down to SD card, format the SD card, format SD1. Am I sure? Yes. Now my SD card is smart and knows that it is going to be recording audio. Now the menu system is all operated by this knob that also presses and turns. So basically our main menu system will change and go through lots of different ways of viewing at it if you just scroll through the knob. There are basically two options that I personally like. I like the one that shows me 1 through 8, or the one that shows me 1 through 8 with a left and right output of the entire mix. So 1 through 8 will show you there are 8 inputs and it'll show you each individual input bouncing, and then the left and right will be like a kind of pre-mixed version of everything combined in a left and right stereo situation. So let me plug something in so we can kind of see this as an example. I'm going to plug something into track 5, and we're not seeing anything because track 5 has to be enabled. In order to turn a track on, you have to turn these lights on, basically to enable that track. So as you can see, now I have levels bouncing. I have a shotgun mic plugged in, and I'm getting track 5, but I'm also getting a left-right mix of everything. We only have one track, so those are going to be identical leveling right now. What's important to know is if you record, and I'll get into this, but when you have every track on and you record, you're going to get a file that has 5 tracks, because I have 5 tracks turned on, but 4 of those tracks are going to be completely empty and just like really fill up and pollute your timeline. Only have a track on if you're actively using that track. Otherwise, you'll get more tracks in your editing system than you need, and those will just be blank and you'll have to go and delete them, and it kind of makes a bit of a mess. But right now we just have something in 5, and that's good for now. In order to change these levels, you adjust this knob, and obviously the more you turn it up, we're going to peak. The more you turn it down, we're going to get into safer ranges. Something about here is good. For this operating system, we'd like to aim for -8 is where I like to aim. So I'd actually turn this down somewhere around here. Cool. Let's look into the enormous menu system. Well, actually, first, let me show you how to record. So basically, to record, you press record, and then to stop, this button looks blank. There actually used to be a stop here. Some of our F8s are getting old and worn. To stop recording, you press the stop button. Well, I didn't press it firmly enough. Okay, so stop. If you press record and then press record again, nothing happens. If you press record and you press pause, you're actually just going to pause your recording and add a mark. That does nothing either. You need to press record to start and then stop to stop recording. Make sure you're always pressing stop to end your recording. Okay, so the setup for this is pretty normal. The first thing we're going to look at is in our input options. So our input options, we need to look at our import sources and make sure they're all at mic. All of these are, you're going to be recording using microphones, so our import source needs to be set as mic. If you ever need to change all of them for some reason, just do all mic and it will change them all to mic. There's a lot of options here that we simply don't need. I know Phantom Power is an important one if we want to power our microphone. So in Phantom, you can turn that on or off for each individual track. So we can offer Phantom Power for input 1, but not for input 5, or however you want to divvy that up. The last thing I want to point out here is auto mix. We never want to use an auto mix. That would mean that the recorder is changing our gain and kind of going up and down as it's guessing the best possible levels. It's bad at that, and it will ruin your audio and make you do a lot more work in post. Always keep those all on off. Okay, now we need to check our record setting. We have an output as well. If you check your output, there's really nothing in here for us other than changing some of the headphone settings. So I would stay out of the output menu, but the record menu has some important things for us. Basically, we can change the format of how we're recording to the SD card. So if you go to the SD card, the default is a poly wave file, track 1 through 8. What that's going to do is it's only going to give you one file when you bring up the files in the computer, but in DaVinci or whatever editing software, when you drag and drop that file onto the timeline, it's going to spread apart and show you have 8 different tracks, one for each input. So that's awesome. So you don't get a million files, but it still has everything in there individually. Now, you can change that if you want to. If instead you would like 8 completely different files, you go track 1 through 8, and when you press record, you're going to have 8 different files that filter in through your memory card. Another option that I would use is track 1 through 8 plus left and right polywav. I usually only use the polywav 1 through 8 or the polywav 1 through 8 plus left and right. What this does is it gives you 8 complete different tracks for each input, but it also gives you it gives you a stereo left and right mix of everything. So it gives you all 8 files, but then also an additional track that has everything combined together in a stereo file. That makes editing a little bit easier before you really get into the audio engineering and sound design portion of your editing process. But for the most part, I really only do the first option, track 1 through 8 polywav. You can change the sample rate here. You can change a lot of the settings. I wouldn't touch these. As a default, you need to be at 48 kilohertz. Your bit depth rate should be at 24. You're almost never going to record MP3, but you have a few settings here. You always want the largest one. But these two are the most important. Your sample rate at 48 and your bit depth rate at 24. Now you can record a higher sample rate, which is going to give you more details in your files, but it's also going to really chew up files more. But if you're ever recording Foley or something like that, I would do 96 kilohertz if you really, really want some audio that you're going to engineer and distort or really play with in the editing process. I would do 96. I would never do 192 at our level of working. That would be fairly ridiculous file sizes for audio. But for default, all you need is 48 kilohertz, which is a really robust file size and will work just fine for our purposes. The last option we have in here that's interesting is dual channel record. What this does is if I turn this on for input 1, I will get one track that has all of our current settings at our current gain level, and then it will also record a second track level that is at a lower gain level, usually about 12 decibels lower. This is if you can't fully control what's happening on set and you think someone might scream and peak your audio, this records a second audio level 12 decibels lower that would probably have recorded that scream at a safe level. It's just a bit of safety. It takes up more file sizes. I don't actually use it very often, but if you can't have full control and don't really have, if you're recording something live and you don't have full control over exactly what it's going to sound like, this is something that could really help you out and save you if you think loud noises will erupt kind of randomly. We also have pre-record on for this. This is something you can turn on and off, but basically when you press record, you're actually going to get these 6 seconds prior to that recording that is saved as well. So basically this thing is constantly recording 6 seconds of a file, and the moment you press record, you will save that previous 6 seconds. So if you're ever in a situation where you're going to be late to press the record button, this is good because you'll get the previous 6 seconds. Now it's going to add more time and data to how much you're recording, but it's a pretty good, safe idea to have that on. But if you don't think you need it, turn that off. Okay, there's a couple important things under the system file. There's a lot of stuff in here like changing the date and time and some just system-based options. The other thing that's important in here is our track knob option, basically what this knob is controlling. If you go back to factory default settings, this will actually control the fader. And what the fader is doing is it's not adjusting the gain of each track option, but it is how much of that track gets mixed into the final mix. The fader is a bit of an incomplete way to control the volume level of what you're trying to record. I would always do the trim option, and that's recording the gain level, where you can really, really fine tune and change how loud or how quiet something is. The fader doesn't really allow you to amplify the volume enough in my experience. So we would always like to keep the track knob option on the trim setting. Trim just means the gain trim. You're just adjusting the gain. Okay, the last things that I'd like to go into is the file naming system. Now you can just not play with this and just have your files get named on an almost automatic generic version. But if you ever want to name your files and name your tracks and be really articulate and help the editor out in the post-production process, there's lots of options for this. So if you go into Finder, you can go into our SD card and look at all our takes that we have. Right now we have 3 takes from somewhere. There's a trash setting and a false take file. But if you're first starting out a shoot, you should go in here and start a new file, a new folder, and name it something. Let's just name this one Poop for fun, because I'm a 12-year-old boy. We will end that, and that'll be our file name. Once you go into the metadata, which is what we're going to be looking at, we can now see all of our options for our naming conventions. So a note, so basically this is the note that's going to be left for the next take. I like to leave this as good take, and then if something's ever not a good take, I'll go in there and change that. We have a scene name mode. So I like to have the scenes be named after the folder's name, which is Poop. So basically our first scene will be Poop 1, then Poop 2, then afterwards, but you can also just have every scene named after the date or after the username. Now, to put in the username, you simply go to the next file thing and you have a user scene name and you put it in there. So if our scene name is scene 12, you can go in there and just put 12 and then make sure it's being named by the username. Scene incremental mode, that means you can change this from a character, so file A, B, C, D, or file 1, 2, 3, 4. I like numeric, but that's up to you. The track name, so basically every time you record, you get one file, but then you drop that into the editing system, it spreads apart. All it's going to be named is track 1, track 2 through 8. But sometimes it's fun to always know, instead of track 1, have it a name. So in my track 1, my first input XLR on the side, I like to always have my boom in number 1, so I can edit that and have that be called, let me delete all this real quick. I can always put my boom in here and I'll name it boom. That way, every time I drop that in and I see my tracks spread apart, I will know that that is the boom mic. And that means every time I set up this recorder, I need the boom into track 1. But let's say track 2, I want the lav mic for one specific actress every time. I can put her name. Let's say her name is, for time's sake, her name is going to be ABC. So my actress Abika will always be in track 2. So I need to make sure I'm plugging her into track 2 at all times. But when I see it on the editing software, it'll come up with her name. Oh, that's Abika. I hear her. That's her lav. It's a much easier way of knowing where to go. You can name all these and have all your tracks be named the exact input source. This is just a convention that really, really helps the editor keep track of what all the audio files are. You'll save a lot of time in editing when you know that that sound is coming from Sarah's audio input and instead of track 3's audio input, because if it just says track 3, you really have no idea what that is as the editor. You might not even have been on set and have any idea of what anything is. But if it says Sarah, you know that, hey, that's Sarah's lav. Hey, that's Pete's lav. Hey, that's the boom. And you can more easily edit because of that. Take reset mode is set to folder change. It's either folder change or off, but basically every time I add a new folder, it'll reset the numbering system. So if I go to poop folder 2, let's say we change the scene and I go to poop folder 2, it'll go to take 1, 2, 3 rather than picking back up at take 34, take 35. It'll reset. Let's look at what this looks like in practice. So I have my level set, I have track 5 working, so let's say I record, and it'll say poop take 1, and I'll stop that. I gotta press this pretty good. And then I record again, and now it's poop take 2. We get it. So let's say you finish this scene, you're gonna move on to the next scene. It's nice for organizational purposes to have a new folder for each scene. So right now we're on the poop folder, but the next one will be poop 1, poop 2, poop 3. To quickly do that, if you press and hold the stop button, then press the next button, it'll ask you to create a new scene folder. You'll say yes, and now you'll record, and it'll be poop 1, track 1. And you'll stop and record again, poop 1, track 2. So now we have 2 folders, and the filing system has reset. You press and hold the stop button, and then press the next button 1 time, and it'll ask you to create a scene folder. When that comes up, you know you've done it right, and we'll say yes. It'll instantly say empty folder, which is scary, but just press record and you'll see that we are now poop 2, track 1. We've created a new folder. To once again simplify this, everything should be completely working out of the bag. You just have to power the Zoom, turn it on, plug in your audio sources, your boom kit, your lav mics, make sure their levels are good, and record it. That's basically the most simplified version of it, and that's really easy to do straight out of the bag. But there are some more intricacies that you can go into the menu system and really set up to help yourself in post-production and in the production process. Remember to ask us if you have any more questions, and good luck on your shoot.